Happy Astrological New Year. I can't believe it has been a year since I first started this astrological season series. But this year, we're changing it up because we have so much change happening this year. I don't want to just go by astrological season. I really want to connect in with how do we actually navigate the changes happening this year? How do we actually navigate the ups and downs collectively, emotionally, energetically, physically in our world? And how do we stay empowered through what is going to be happening this year? Because if you have been anywhere on social media, on astrology, the astrology side of Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or wherever it is, you have heard people talking about how big of a year 2025 is going to be. And yes, it is going to be a huge year. But we do not have to fall into a lot of the fear mongering that is going on. And that is unfortunately really present whenever we are going through a lot of changes. And with that being said, I'm also not trying to demonize any astrologers or practitioners who are trying to express the kind of severity or the massive impact that these shifts are going to have on us, because I think just in the collective psyche of where we are in this world and in society, it's very, very easy to hear something like, oh, big changes are happening, and to fall into that anxiety or that fear. And that is a deeper note on like where Neptune has been. But with that all being said, in a social media video or a social media post, it's a very brief snapshot of all the nuances that come with an astrological transit or a huge collective shift and transit that we're experiencing this year. We're experiencing a lot, but it can often be that when you summarize something, it's very easy for people to just kind of take it and run with it and be like completely scared for their life, which is not that's not the purpose of this podcast. This episode is for you to really anchor into your own grounding and your own empowerment through this year and through the shifts that we are going to be experiencing. And the shifts we are going to be experiencing are going to be very fast because we have our outer planets moving from earth and water signs into air and fire. So Pluto has already moved into Aquarius. We know that. It's moved over the past couple of years. So it was in Capricorn before. This year, Neptune is going to be moving from Pisces into Aries. Saturn moves from Pisces into Aries. And Uranus is moving from Taurus into Gemini. So with this shift, when we move from water and earth into fire and air, this is a massive shift of speed and of energy. So water and earth, in terms of our four elements, they are what we call elementally naturally compatible. Fire and air is the other pair that are naturally compatible. And that's because earth and water both move slow. They are very foundational. They're about, our root systems, our core structures that hold up society. Whereas fire and air move fast. They are all about energy and ideas, right? Whereas earth and water, again, is like the tangible things like banking systems, governments. I don't know why that just came to mind, but fire and air is much more heady, it's much more energetic, it's much more conceptual, much more intellectual. So the energy shifts. We're going from a slow kind of collective pacing to fast. And the significance of it being our four outer planets, our four most outer planets, is that our outer planets always herald a massive collective shift. So with our inner planets, these are, the sun up through to Mars, even a little bit Jupiter. That's more like personal stuff because the transits happen so quickly, right? Like the sun moves all around the chart or the zodiac in a whole year. So there's not really a very significant or lengthy period of time for its impact to be really felt. Whereas with our outer planets, it's a long time. Like they can stay in a sign for up to 15 years or 20 years. So that is a huge generational shift that we are experiencing. And we're going from the slowness of earth and water to the speed of fire and air. On top of that, this is where I love diving into all different kind of practices, because in Chinese metaphysics, last year, 2024, we just entered into the age of 9. So in Chinese metaphysics, we have different ages that are 20-year periods. So from 2024 up until 2043, we are in an age of 9. And 9 correlates to the element of fire in Chinese metaphysics. Now, the elements, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but they have different elements, but there is also a fire element in Chinese metaphysics. And this age comes once every 180 years, because 9 is the only fire number from 1 to 9, essentially. So if you are feeling like things are speeding up, getting more intense, or really feeling a push to change, you're not imagining it. It is the way that the energy of the world is changing. And like I said before, social media there's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety there, but I want to make it clear that you are not powerless in such a rapidly changing world. And astrology is not here to make you afraid of the future. At least ethical astrology and empowered astrology is not here to make you afraid of the future. If you are reading something and there is a big undertone of fear, or it's making you feel anxious, please disengage with that, because the goal of astrology is always, how do you understand what is happening, right? Because we don't want to bypass the truth and the energies that are shifting. But how do I stay centered in that? How can I ground into that? How can I be empowered and be proactive in aligning with how the energy is going to be shifting and using it to my advantage in a way? So how can we work with the energy rather than feeling like, oh my God, the world is, collapsing and we are just doomed? So every single shift, like I said, every time the planets shift, you can always make up something to be afraid of, with not just shifts, but things like retrogrades as well, right? But our transits are not here to punish us in any way. They are here to shift the template of how we have been living. They're here to wake us up. So instead of thinking like, oh my God, with this shift, what's the next terrible thing that's going to happen? You want to reframe that. You want to think instead, like, how do I want to engage with this shift? So there's a really famous quote that says, transits are an act of fate, but how you respond is your act of free will. So transits, whatever's happening in the collective energy, that is an act of fate, right? That's going to happen to all of us who decided to be on this earth at this time. How we respond, how we react, that is going to be us exercising our power, our sovereignty, our agency. So how do you want to actually respond to this? You get to decide how you want these changes to play out in your life. And on that note, I also want to add that it can be very easy to be like, oh, I don't even want to deal with that. I'm just gonna, avoid that. But here's the thing, whatever you are not changing, you are choosing. So if you are not if you are choosing, if you do not want to get on board with doing the kind of deeper work that comes with such a big collective shift, you are choosing to stay in the same patterns. Okay, just a kind of note to keep in mind there. So going into the age of 9, in Chinese metaphysics, 9 represents the eyes, but it doesn't just represent our physical eyes, it represents here, our third eye. So it represents the things that we cannot see, right? It represents energy because it has to do with our heart as well. So fire is a very destructive element at the same time that it is very cleansing and creating, right? Because we burn away things, and then if you think about like bushfires, right? I'm thinking about, especially in Australia, we have native plants that actually need fire to germinate. So it's destruction and creation. We can't have creation without destruction, and we can't have destruction without creation. So fire, this 20-year period that we are in now, is so much about aligning with our truth that we might not be able to physically see yet. So what is that inner truth inside your heart? What have you been blind to, whether willingly or not? This is about tuning in to our own energy, our own truth, and being discerning in that way. Instead of just trusting everything that your, physical eyes see, it's also about, how do I trust my intuition? How do I trust what I am sensing intuitively with my third eye? What am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I envisioning there? So it has everything to do with intuition. It has everything to do with aligning with your truth. It has everything to do with, how am I going to be of service in this world to actually help people and to help the collective for the highest good of those people. So it burns away anything that's not pure. And this is why in every single if my clients have asked me about business, I've always said to them, you need to really tap into your deeper why. You need to really figure out, where in my business am I not being authentic? And it's not to bring up any shame, but it's genuinely because in business, we all get caught up in the money or in, scaling or whatever it is. But if you tune back into your deeper why, is your business or is your life even aligned with the vision that you see for yourself? Does it feel authentic to who you are or who you want to be? So now if we go back to Western astrology, the timeline for the dates are Neptune moving into Aries on March 30th. That is our first kind of big shift. Neptune shifts into Aries. Saturn is going to move into Aries late May. So we're looking at May 26th. And then Uranus moves into Gemini around July 8th. So early July. So essentially for the next kind of half year, 4 or 5 months, these are when these outer planets are going to be shifting. Now they are actually all going to be retrograding back into Pisces and Taurus. And they're going to then go direct and move back into these fire and air signs next year. But this year is the beginning of that shift. On that note as well, if you have your Saturn in Aries, Capricorn, Libra, or Cancer, because that's me as well, our next Saturn cycle starts this year. Okay, but then you want to look at the degrees to see when it's exact. And we're not going to talk about that because that is a whole other conversation there. So that is the timeline. The next few months are going to be really, really powerful and really, really, you will, if you're connected to your intuition, to deeper energy, you will feel that call. You will feel that call to be like, where are you playing it small? What have you been holding back that you need to share with the world, or you just know you need to embody more of? So that is a lot of that Aries kind of energy. With Neptune specifically moving into Aries soon, Neptune is all about the spiritual world, the spiritual realm. So for the past 14 years, when Neptune has been in its home sign of Pisces, we have had a lot of spiritual awakening for different people. There's been a lot more spiritual conversations, discourse going around, but there also has been a lot of fear, which is the low road or the unhealthy negative side of that Pisces energy, or Neptune in Pisces. There's been a lot of overwhelm, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. When Neptune moves into Aries, Aries brings form to something, right? Pisces is much more permeable, wishy-washy. Aries brings form. So in this next phase, it is likely that we are going to see physical evidence of these spiritual concepts, these spiritual things that we've just been talking about and theorizing, right? In that Pisces energy, we're going to see it in form. Then when we have Saturn moving into Aries, that is also a time when, with Saturn being our foundations, because Saturn is all of the things that are structural and foundations. Like if you think about Saturn ruling the bones in our body, right? It's literally like what are the systems and structures that are holding us up as a collective? What are the systems and structures that are so ingrained and implemented into our life? So Saturn moving into Aries, it's been in Pisces since 2022, 23. So Saturn moves quite quickly. It's about a 2 to 3 year gap between each sign. But this is also going to bring a shift in terms of what are we learning now in the collective, right? With Pisces, with the past 2-3 years, it's been about a lot of emotional kind of awakening, a lot of emotional healing that we've been going through. Now that we move into Aries, the lesson shifts. We are now going to be in situations where we have to learn to stand up and speak up for ourselves and align and really embody what we're passionate about. How do we lead? How are we proactive in living our own lives instead of just following along with what other people expect, what's expected of us? And then with Uranus moving into Gemini, Uranus always shakes things up. Uranus is the planet of unexpected things. It brings this kind of electric energy wherever it moves into. And with Gemini ruling things like our mind, our ideas, our communication, you can think of what that is going to be like, right? It's going to really shake up our beliefs, our narratives, the way that we share information, the way that we process information. Uranus also is linked to technology, and Gemini being an air sign, like I am tentatively predicting massive advances in tech, in AI especially, even in education, in what we talk about on a collective scale, on a global scale. So with that, you really want to think about what are some outdated beliefs or perspectives that I kind of need to start challenging now, or are being challenged with the way things are going in the world and the way things are progressing. What perspectives within myself do I need to kind of update or upgrade, right? And to really align with what is going on. Now, when these planets shift, they're all going to be sextiling each other. So a sextile is a type of aspect in astrology. It is a very harmonious and supportive aspect. So they're all going to be in like the first few degrees of their signs, working in tandem, which is why I'm saying like, this is a huge shift because they're all moving at the same time. So it's not just that they're going to be in the fire and air signs together, but they're all pretty much moving at the same time, and they're all going to be in a really like within degree, a really tight degree of aspecting each other. And so they're all going to be like triggering each other, basically. Like one thing from, let's say, like Neptune is going to trigger a conversation for Uranus and Gemini, and then that's going to say something about Saturn in Saturn in Aries, and so on and so forth. So they're going to be really connected. It is going to be a huge kind of collective shift. And actually, if we go back in history, so I talked about this in my 2025 workshop. I'll actually link it below. I closed it off originally, but I'm going to link it below. So if you want to grab it, you can grab the workshop. But the last time that we have had our 4 outer planets in their signs they're moving into is actually the 16th century. So back in 1523 up until like 1553. And even back then, they were not overlapping like they are now. Back then, there was a period of time when Saturn was in Aries and Uranus was in Gemini. And then there was a little bit of a gap. And then Pluto was in Aquarius and Neptune was in Aries. So that last period, they were kind of close in timeline to being in the same signs as they are now. But this year, they are moving into those signs at the same time. If we go back in history, so in that 16th century, I'm just going to give you kind of the cliff notes of what was happening back then. So that was the Spanish invasion of the Inca Empire. There was the breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church by King Henry VIII. So that's when he created the Church of England and published the Great Bible. It was kind of the start of the scientific revolution as well. So scientific advancements, proving the intangible. Remember what I said about, spiritual things taking form? A lot of exploration of new ideas and proving new ideas. And also, interestingly enough, that was when Copernicus published his heliocentric theory, proposing that the sun is the actual center of the solar system, not our Earth. So through this time period, there was a lot of changes in terms of leadership, power structures in the world, and a lot of different ideologies coming and going, and at times taken to the extreme. So when we are navigating the changes of this world, of our current world of this year, it's really, really important to know, have the understanding that previously, historically, it has led to really drastic and, how do I put this? Detrimental effects, right? Astrology is always going to have both a positive and a negative side. We can see through historical patterns what the negatives are as well as what the positives are. So how can we work with this energy? That is the main question. That should be the focus of your thought patterns this year, of your internal dialogue this year. So these transits are really pushing all of us to choose, what does our next chapter look like? Are we going to be proactive in changing, in shifting, in deciding what that's going to look like? Are we going to be proactive in building that? Or is the universe going to have to drag us kicking and screaming into this new chapter of our life? So if you think about, again, fire and air, express yourself, taking up space, learning how to embody your healthy ego, really leaning into what you're passionate about. With air, this is also expression, but it's also being curious about things, asking questions, learning, being flexible, questioning what you already think you know. So this is not about waiting for whatever change to happen, which is more common with earth and water energy because it's more slower. This is the universe asking you hey, are you ready to become an active participant in your own life if you aren't already? Now, in terms of if you want to see exactly how it might affect you, that's when you want to look at your own chart. So what you can do is you can look at where Aries and Gemini are in your chart. And because these planets are moving in the first few degrees, you can just look at where the start of those signs are. And that can indicate where you're going to feel the most change. So the house that they fall in for you. So again, instead of seeing these shifts as, oh my God, how do I survive this? I really want you to reframe that and think of it as okay, this is my story up till this point. Now I get to really shake things up. This story is being there are endless possibilities now. How do I want to reimagine where my story is going to go? How do I want to rewrite or keep writing and shift my writing or shift my story into what I really want? So as a conclusion, I guess, I just want to again reinforce that you are in the driver's seat of your own life. Never ever give your power to astrology in a way where you let astrology take the wheel, okay? That is not how we exercise and practice ethical, empowered astrology here. You are not a passenger in your life. You are the driver. You are co-creating with what energy or what shifts are going on in the universe. And also these shifts are happening to us for a reason. They're opening different doors for us, even if during the process it feels really uncomfortable. Because remember, we can never grow if we don't push into that discomfort. If we don't push into our growth edge, we're just going to stay in the same spot. We're just going to stay in the same box. And we're just going to stay captivated by the fears that we have, the stories that we have, the wounds that we have. So really ask yourself, what do I want to build in this new era? What life do I want to live? What life do I want to build for myself? And also, who do I want to be? What version of me do I need to step into to live that life that I want? So again, we have our outer planets moving into fire and air signs, but that is not a reason to be afraid of things. Shifts and changes happen, and we just need to be empowered and be grounded in how do we actually navigate them for ourselves. So grounding is going to be really important this year. Please make sure that if you haven't already, you have or you build a grounding ritual or a grounding routine for yourself. Okay, so this can look like breath work. This can look like embodiment work. Anything that really activates your parasympathetic nervous system is going to be really good. Any kind of simple daily rituals that anchor you. Practice a lot of self-compassion, self-reflection, just connecting in with your own energy. Reflect on things, journal. If you don't like journaling, you can create like a Finsta and keep a journal that way, right? Whatever works for you to anchor yourself and come back to your own energy, that is going to be really important. And of course, if you can find, if you have a support system or you can find a community that you really feel like you belong in, that you can rely on, that supports you, that's going to be really good. Another thing as well, just before we finish up, watch what you're consuming on social media. Watch what you are consuming and bringing into your energy field. Okay, so like I said before, if you are reading any posts or watching any videos that make you feel really scared, really anxious, please disengage with that. Really be intentional with how you are moving forward, because you can kind of get away with that in earth and water energy. You can't in fire and air. Everything is clear and things speed up. So the things like the impacts or the consequences of our choices are going to be much more immediate than they may have been over the past decade or two. So that is all for today. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope that this space, my podcast, my energy, my work, can be a source of grounding and empowerment for you throughout this year, because like I said, we are going through these massive changes, but I will be here to keep you grounded and take away a lot of the kind of fear and anxiety that can come that are attached with a lot of the discourse on what is going to happen throughout this year.